Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way. This is a podcast for serious writers who want to develop their skills in artistry and stand out in a crowded industry by taking intelligent, creative risks. I'm your host, Jonathan Ball. I hold a PhD in literature. I'm the author of numerous books, and I take a very analytical approach to art making, emphasizing both efficiency and experimentation. I have a new book coming out this year, published by Coach House Books, which is my first book in 5 years and my first poetry book in 7 years. It's called The National Gallery, and it contains a host of strange poems, including twisted elegies from my iPhone, sonnets about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I got poems for my children, a poem that campaigns to make me the poet laureate of hell, and all sorts of strange, experiments. And if you go to jonathanball.com/new book, so again, that's jonathanball.com/new book, then you can read the nice things that people have to say about the book. Filmmaker Guy Madden has some very nice things to say about it. Giller Prize finalist Gary Barwin, who wrote Yiddish for Pirates, has some nice things to say about it. Author professors Natalie Capel and Daniel Scott Tisdall have some nice things to say. What I'll say is that it's called the National Gallery because the book is about what value art has today in our public lives and in our private lives, and why we should, or maybe why we should not create art. As writers, I think we sometimes have to stop and ask the question, why write? So this book is my attempt to answer that question by trying to turn what my poetry is inside out and do all sorts of things I've never done before in my poetry. So like I say, you can learn more about the National Gallery by going to jonathanball.com/new book. And there you'll see a form where you can enter your email address. And when you do that, I'll email you my favorite poem from the book. So this is a poem that is otherwise, not available until the book comes out. You'll get a sneak peek, and then when we get closer to the book coming out, I'll send you a bunch of information on how to order the book in a way that gives you access to all sorts of bonuses. I'm going to be giving away free books and all sorts of really special bonus material for people who pre-order the National Gallery. So if you go to jonathanball.com/new book and enter your email, I'll tell you more about the National Gallery when you do that. So now let's move on to the episode. So this is the second part of my interview with Tony Burgess, author of Pontypool Changes Everything and a screenwriter of the movie Pontypool, among many other books and films. So Tony and I are talking about horror. This is the second part of the interview, as I say. The first part of this interview is available at jonathanball.com/30. So jonathanball.com/30. That's going to take you to the first part of the interview if you haven't already heard it. In this second part of the interview, Tony and I continue to talk about this broad topic of writing and writing horror. And we're talking about Tony's life a little bit. We're talking about his books that had been released to this point, the 2015. Again, the context of this is me interviewing Tony in 2015, so a number of years ago now, about his work in a broad sense, with the idea that I was going to, do some more writing on Tony Burgess's own work, some more criticism. I had written a essay prefacing one of Tony's book collections. The book I recommend, if you're not familiar with Tony's work, is a book called The Bewdley Mayhem. The Bewdley Mayhem is a repackaging of his first 3 books in an omnibus edition. That includes his most famous book, Pontypool Changes Everything, which was the basis for the horror film Pontypool. And if you haven't heard of Pontypool, Pontypool is a brilliant little story about a zombie virus that is spread through language, more or less. And so I suggest you go check out that omnibus edition. It's a very affordable, roughly $20, and you can get 3 books, including Burgess's most famous novel. Plus, it has an introduction by me. And in the show notes of this episode, I'm actually going to post that introduction. So if you're not familiar with Tony, or if you want to just know more about what I think about Tony Burgess's work, go to jonathanball.com/31. That will give you, as show notes for this episode, it'll provide a link to the previous part of the interview. And it'll also give you the essay from the Beautifully Mayhem, my essay on Tony Burgess's work that prefaces that book. And there'll be a link where you can find more information about that book and how you can get a hold of that. Another thing I just want to note is if you listen to the last interview, again, these are just recordings that originally Tony has agreed, for me to put them online. Because when I was listening to them again, I thought it was a very interesting conversation. I think it is something that, although part of it was the basis for a believer interview that we did, which is also in the show notes in the previous episode, jonathanbaldock.com/30. You can read that believer interview and again listen to the first part of this interview. Although we recorded this not really with the idea of anyone listening to it, it's pretty informal and I think really interesting. But there is some sort of fun little things. So like if you listen to the last episode, you'll notice that the episode just ends when Tony's phone goes off. We kind of start the episode talking about cell phones and how neither of us are very good at technology, and the episode ends when his just cell phone goes off. I noticed when I was editing this all together that that's kind of a nice, that's roughly half the interview. It kind of is a nice weird, because of the interruption, it's a nice weird ending. I was going to add a little note just saying, come check out the second part of the episode later. But I just thought, it just is funny to me. If you were listening to the episode and you were kind of confused about like why the phone rings and the episode just is over, I just thought it was kind of funny. So this episode begins with after Tony has hung up the phone, after having to take the call, we kind of get back into the issue. So we just sort of dive cold into the topics that we're discussing, continue our conversation. And so here is the second part of my interview with Tony Burgess. Again, it's a few years old now. This is from 2015, but I think it's a very illuminating, fascinating look at a writer who has, a strange and brilliant mind, and who is probably my favorite writer working today. So without further ado, the second part of the interview with Tony Burgess. I like that mask.
Talk great. About records. This is not a mask. This is
really? It looks like
life cast of my face. That was done for a big prosthetic thing that had to be put on for a film we just shot.
Oh wow!
So that's actually that's actually my actual face.
Are you gonna have an exploding head, like a scanner's like exploding head? Or?
I kind of do. I've got my jaws, mouth bubbly of a surviving death cult master.
Nice.
Who got gas burned. Anyway,
so how did you get then the idea for Pontypool? Like, because if it wasn't sort of a direct,
it wasn't, absolutely wasn't, which I would happily cop to. It just wasn't. It came from a bunch of crazy ideas that I'm still working out, and in fact is a big part of this next novel. And it sounds so ridiculous when I say it out loud. It's just this belief I have, and having a belief for me is probably not the way most people have beliefs. I don't actually believe in my beliefs. They're catalysts or whatever you want to call it. They're a little ingredient that's going to make something happen. So the idea that in late 15th century and early 16th century, the scholar Petrus Ramus, you ever heard of him? Petrus Ramus, Ramus. He was an obscure kind of scholar who was fighting at the time on universities, and he had this bizarre neo-Socratic, occult, wacky theory that you had to use in classrooms next to no instruments. No writing instruments, no records, no illustrations, no examples, no demonstrations. What you had to do was you had to invest in the architecture of the room, all of the knowledge up until this minute. And it was an art of memory type of,
like a memory theater.
Yes, like a memory theater idea. Yeah. And that your end goal was to deliver your classroom to heaven. If they were able to, with the correct gestures and the correct words and unpacking the room in the right way, would be a deliverance and would alter the reader and the speaker, eternally.
So this ritualistic
and anagogic, everything. Yeah. And so anyway, he people like Christopher Marlowe picked up a lot of his ideas. And I just I got sort of really hung up on this notion of having these words that would produce these effects on someone. I'm saying this as simply as possible. It would have an effect on you, like a scripture would have an effect on your. This would have an effect, and so to me, and at the time too, I was very hung up on writing a horror novel. So I wanted I wanted a zombie novel, and so I wanted The Contagion to be something, and it would have to be, and it ended up just being that for me because it was available. It was something I was thinking a lot about, which was the idea that a word crosses over to becoming a physical thing that has those properties, and then how it causes these physical effects.
So if you had before that the idea that you just wanted to do a horror novel, specifically a zombie novel, where did that idea come from? Like, why the interest in the horror novel?
Ever since I was a kid. Yeah. That's a whole other thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, when I was a kid, it was all horror films and Shirley Jackson and Lovecraft and all of that. And to me, that was just the most exciting, compelling aesthetic and everything about horror films, and lived on horror films all through my teen years and 20s on VHSs, way before feeding myself would be that, stacks and stacks of VHS tapes and watching Phantasm 45 times a day and just obsessing over that. And I there's a bunch of and why that? I think because when I was very young, I had those experiences that I kind of still talk about, and what I've been talking about, and that came through, oddly enough, making Universal Monster models out of that glue in my room, the Hunchback, the Dracula, the thing. But I would use so much of that fucking glue, and I'd be 9 years old, that in the middle of the night at 2 a.m, I would wake up hallucinating madly that Dracula was flapping me in the face and the Hunchback was stomping off the walls. And it was a regular occurrence in my house that everybody be awoken at 3 a.m. because I'd be screaming and being chased by Medusa or whatever it was. And it was all a very direct effect of the glue.
So just to keep on zombies for a second, like later on you did the End Body Problem, which to me is a really interesting zombie novel because it sort of takes the zombies as a waste disposal problem, and it also just eliminates the zombies as a threat. Like in some ways they're a threat because of the perception that changes as a result of them being in this corpse shroud or the earth. But it to me is like one of the freshest approaches to the zombie novel, not even so far in making the zombies this kind of environmental factor, but in almost just relegating them to such a background position that they don't even threaten a character at any point.
Yes. Well, I thought to me that's a kind of a logical conclusion of what seems is apparent on every fucking frame of every zombie movie, that you can move slightly faster than them. And it's not going to take a lot of effort, right? Slightly fat. So if we just sped up our lives by 20%, zombies would be nothing but shadows. You know what I mean? Like nothing but things that follow us. And so there's that's always in a zombie film. It's also part of what makes them horrifying, because eventually, if you don't have anywhere to go, then you will be got, or whatever, whatever the trap is. And so, absolutely. That was once I sort of removed that, they became horrible in all of these other sort of other ways that just started to surface with them, like the notion of things of animation, perpetual animation that is pointless and never leaving, and all the things that
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's so interesting that it in other zombie movies and zombie stories, you tend to have like these other ways zombies are horrible, in addition to the fact that they're coming after you.
Yeah.
But here you just have to remove them coming after you. You know, like it's so, such a simple operation on one level, but it really does open things up in this fascinating way, and then you get an even darker story than you get with zombies, like. Which often produce somewhat hopeful stories, even like I look at World War Z, like the book World War Z, which I really like, but I mean it's ultimately a very it's ultimately an extremely optimistic book.
Oh yeah. Well, and they become, they always become, stories about our better natures, even after their stories about our worst nature.
Pulling together to fight them. And,
And in that, you're going to say, oh my God, we've got dark elements with us too. All the kind of like fairly reassuring and obvious observations about human life or whatever, human behavior, social life. But that to me is just sort of never all that interesting. Although I do enjoy it. I mean, I'm a zombie fan, right? So I'll watch. One of the things, and this is kind of goes back to what you were talking about before about where the monster is. And when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and when in the sort of boom of the B grade VHS tape shitty movies, right? Where you had things like Driller Killer, which is actually a great movie, but you had things like Driller Killer, Phantasm, another great movie. But Sleepaway Camp and Pieces and I Spit on Your Grave and all of those films. I can watch them over and over and over again. And what was compelling to me was looking for a film that I felt the director or the people making it were awful. And that the film was terrible and it didn't even have to do much. But if I could sense that the hands making this thing were awful, monstrous people who would just as soon kill me as you know what I mean? And that would be the thing. I was obsessed with that. It showed up you see it showing up in different places. I think that Rob Zombie achieves that in something like Devil's Rejects. It feels like the person making it isn't well and isn't going is happy with things that repulse us, repulse and pull us apart. I mean, because the scene in the motel where they're taunting Three's Company chick, it's Rob Zombie thinking this is what we want to do. We want to rape and torture that fucking bitch from Three's Company. And you realize that it kills the film. The film is no longer happening. It's this horrible thing that you are now part of. And that's always something that terrifies. And that's what I sometimes try to get to, is like a feeling that the person has that there's a pair of very cold hands coming up behind them while they're reading this, and it doesn't like them reading it.
That's the one thing I always found impressive about. It makes me think of the difference to me between like John Carpenter and Hitchcock, who I both enjoy. Yeah, I feel like there's a real difference in that they're both these kind of clinical technicians. But Carpenter, I think you really feel like he is a clinical technician who is in control and is interested in a distance. But whereas Hitchcock is all those things, but also is just in a movie like Psycho, he keeps trying to take your attention to the fact that you are enjoying watching the woman get killed.
Well, and I mean, and that's in Rear Window. It's in a bunch of films, absolutely. I think that's what we all love about Hitchcock, is that you feel like you're in an unhealthy mind's, little playroom, and that it wants you to play with its toys, right? And you shouldn't be.
and like to me, that's what's always most impressive or affecting in Psycho is that the moment where, after the shower scene is kind of near its end, there's this great shot where she kind of reaches towards reaches her hand out, and it seems like she's reaching towards you for help.
Right.
And then he kind of pans a little bit, and the motivation is, she's grabbing the shower curtain. But initially, you can't see the shower curtain in the frame. You don't know what she's doing, and there's just like this split second before you get a motivation for the action in the space of the film,
Yeah.
It does her seem like she's reaching for you to help, and you're not helping her.
Yeah.
And in fact, you would rather watch her die. And that seems to be like the aestheticization of everything in that whole sequence.
Absolutely.
It all seems to push towards that, and it's prefaced with literally a POV shot from Norman's perspective. So you get you just get equated with Norman in so many ways in that film.
Oh yeah.
Then he's the new main character.
Yeah.
It's
when you have that great eye shot of you see him looking in, which is the posthumous Duchamp piece, so it's called La Donnée, I think, where you have to stand on a box and look through a peeper in a hallway, and that's all that's in the gallery. But inside there is this mannequin of this naked woman, right, and with a typical alchemical machinery that Duchamp puts in stuff, but it's the same, that great feeling of oscillating between watching and being watched, right, and being this hard thing on the outside we're looking in. Great stuff, and he gets that very quickly in economically in that scene.
But it's also another, I always think of the other film I'm really obsessed with is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where to me, you have this great movement in that movie where suddenly after he's killed by the third person, Leatherface, the camera stays with Leatherface, and he moves into that next room, and he's in the chair, and he's worrying. And you can see his anxiety on his face, and you kind of get the impression in that scene that, he's deciding, in the plot of it, he's deciding, he has to go out and start hunting them because where are they coming from? And to me, it's an interesting scene because it starts to not exactly ask you to sympathize with Leatherface, but you're now in the position, you're in the room with Leatherface, you and Leatherface are together. You can almost understand his mind in a sense, even though he has no mind. And it really takes a couple interesting turns there. But that closeness or that proximity to the monster where you start to I feel like you're really... That's another film where, as you say, it does feel like it's made by horrible people.
Yes, exactly. And the incompetence is actually terrifying.
Yes.
So when the camera isn't working properly or the lighting is bad, you realize that the desire is greater than the competence, or the will to get this thing achieved is greater than the desire to make this movie. And that somehow is monstrous. That the film isn't as important as getting her on a hook and getting things upside down and throwing that towards this and that. That's gorgeous.
One thing that I kind of, just to talk about Cash and Corners a bit, maybe, but I think that's something you see in a lot of your books. It seems to me like there's this kind of movement in your books where they kind of barrel very quickly past some sort of event horizon. There's some moment or some traumatic thing that occurs, and it all sort of plays out this trauma in a manner of speaking. It's interesting to hear you talk about it, kind of trying to get kind of close to the event of the book, because it does seem like almost the book's on one hand the story often revolves around at least initially there's something that sets in motion this terrible event, and everything is now wrong. And in Cash Town, it seems like you maybe most clearly draw a parallel there with, in that book you draw a lot of parallels to the whole World Trade Center attacks,
right?
And you have this great moment early in that book where you really get the sense that he's killed her because she didn't go through the green light. Then because he doesn't even really know why, but that's somehow why. And since he did that, now things are just unfolding, and there's a chain reaction that has been set off. And it's got an interesting movement in that book where right at the start, you have when he kills her, he starts to relate in the third person in the past tense how he killed her. As if he's someone stepping outside himself. Then he just starts talking about 9/11. Imagining you were on the plane going into the building, and what would that be like in slow motion? And then, by the end of the book, you've got, of course, that birdhouse, the 9/11 birdhouse and everything. Again, it's a story that seems to me in some ways to almost kind of cleanly be about this sort of 9/11 and more successfully about 9/11 than a lot of American 9/11 books.
Yeah,
but then at the same time,
yes.
there's some ways it's not exactly that thing. Like, it's not cleanly but it's kind of bound up in this traumatic, like almost like I don't know what you'd call it, but like it just feels to me like early in these books you pass through an event horizon, or like there's some moment where it passes through an event.
There's a couple of things there. I mean, and one of them was, yes, you're right. I mean, I had a couple of friends, one of them clearly who died just a couple of years ago from a sudden heart attack after kind of drinking himself to death. But he was going through a very hard time at the time of the World Trade Center thing. Went through a very hard time, and when that happened, he was terribly frustrated because he couldn't explain to anyone powerfully enough how much this mattered. And it was that nobody really understood how deeply and how traumatic and how devastating this was. Clearly he meant to him, and clearly he meant that it resonated because he probably knew his life was pretty much over, but for the dying, right? And that somehow this would keep him alive a little bit longer, is what I think. But he had to corner people and try to explain to them how great this moment was, and nobody would understand. That was a big thing for him. Nobody would ever understand, no matter how many different ways he described it. And he couldn't wake people up. To what, I'm not sure, but that was his frustration. So yeah, I was absolutely thinking about him and a number of other people like that I knew at the time, and still sort of know people that, for them, that is the moment that their life made sense. And everything after that somehow is lined up in a strange way, either to die or to in some other meaningful way, some other meaningful, probably mad way. Another weird literary sort of reference that all is, especially the birds, is the beginning of Maldoror, the Loutremont book. He has a flock of, I think it's albatross or something, great big seabirds coming, or I can't remember what they're, condors, I don't know, they're great big birds coming towards the reader. And one of them chips its beak, I think on a cloud or something, and the beak is broken, causing the bird to tumble down. And all of the other birds that are following it follow it towards the ground. And then the narrator warns and says that this book is clearly not normal, and this is the warning, and we should heed it and not go any further, because this should not happen, that a bird's beak is broken on a cloud at the beginning of a book, and then they all tumble to their death. This is clearly a terrible book that will change you for the worse, right? And so that to me has always been the greatest moment ever. And so yeah, that was part of that whole the birdhouse thing, and the planes, and having it resonate in that way with my friend, and in that way to me anyway. Most of these books are autobiographical.
Well, you even say at one point, Pontypool changes everything. You just start. It just says autobiography, and then. Oh
yeah, it's totally. To me, it's always, and I don't understand why not. When people say, "What do you mean you've got vampires in your world?" and blah blah blah.
But there is interesting in horror. There is like this tradition of not like the divorce of the narrator from the events of the narrative. You have two tropes. Yeah. You have this narrator is piecing together the story, and you have the Lovecraftian. It's a all these insistences on the reality of the story.
And the
I found this manuscript, and this is what it said. I pieced all these things together. Then you have the other trope of like totally sober, clear, third person divorced narration.
Yes.
And to me, what's interesting is like things that are in between them, like Hill House.
Yeah.
Where even the narrator, who is a third-person narrator, who knows what characters are thinking, and so on and so forth, even the narrator does not know what haunts Hill House.
Right.
Yes,
lovely. Yeah.
And it's like this disturbing, omniscience where it's limited only insofar as what haunts Hill House, but otherwise you have like an omniscient narrator.
Right. Lovely. Yeah. That's perfect.
And I feel like you're almost always in this interesting space where like the actual relationship between the narrator and the story is, as you say, like it just is troubled and unstable, and almost an antagonism, but also like it's hard to say even who the narrator is on some level. Like Idaho Winter's maybe the most, the one where you kind of get the most, I guess you'd say, like obvious play with that idea, where you have the narrator, because he's not a very good writer, accidentally including himself in the story, and therefore he becomes a character because he doesn't realize, oh, I shouldn't say I, because I'm writing a third person story, and then it starts to become more and more unstable, and you get the sense that Idaho is now in the author position. Like you get all these interesting movements. Can I just jump back to that for a second? And
sure.
What made you want to write a YA novel?
ECW asked me.
Sure.
So I sat down with. It was a pitch. I mean, I was pitched on it, and it was Jen Hale and somebody else who's no longer there. It was her idea, actually. Sat down and said, "Oh, we think you'd make a great YA writer."
Why do they think that? Like, it seems to me like
I don't. You know what? That's not
the
well, yeah, and that's not the first person. I still get people say that to me. I got some filmmaker who wants to make a children's film with me because he thinks I'd be a natural, and I'll do it, And so then, that was supposed to be a YA novel, and I kind of like when I started it, I felt great because I thought, I'm going to use a pseudonym. Nobody's going to know it's me, and it's going to be I can do anything I want now. As if I haven't until then, And so I just kind of used all these ideas in this really kind of freeing way, and then I think one of the struggles I had when I put the novel down for a long time was when it was sort of like, this is not a YA novel, and I go, yes, it is. It has to be marketed as a YA novel, or I wouldn't have written it this way. Anyway, but so that's why it was a YA novel. However, I have sort of done, like, the Hell Mouths of Beauty is a mock YA novel. It's subtitled Children's Stories for Children, Boys and Girls or something.
I think, are you talking about Fiction for Lovers or?
No. Hell Mouths of Beauty, the first.
Oh yeah, Fiction for Girls and Boys. That's right.
Yeah. So. I'm not sure what that is, except sort of returning to, when you think about a narrative voice that you trust and that is not troubled at all, and it's in some of the first books you read.
Sure.
But the ironic thing, I think, is that those books actually directly trouble the voice much more confidently than books you read as an adult.
Well, the one I think of is the monster at the end of this book. Like that's the most confident, troubled narration in a way, and I guess it's a very solid, metafictional situation, which again you're immersed in as a child. You're turning the pages and wrecking his walls and stuff. And there's the fear of the monster, but we're going towards it at the same time, and it's fun,
fantastic.
It's so much more confident than so many other books.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's all kinds of. I think Never-Ending Story is one of them. They're even the way that Lewis Carroll plays with it.
Well,
but I mean that was sort of the excitement for me anyway. The idea of going to a YA novel, because it takes that trusted voice too, and because that's part of the playground, right? Is that adult voice, that more experienced voice that is going to be fucked with.
One book of yours I really like, especially, is Ravenna Gets, and I like to describe it as it's a short story book, but then everybody in the stories just gets killed, and so like there's like a story unfolding, and then somebody smashes the window and kills everyone in the story, so the story just ends prematurely, and then it goes to the next house, and then eventually you're in a novel because of how it failed to be a short story book.
Perfect. Exactly right.
Like where did that sort of
Well, there's
a
funny
you had
thing.
engineered in advance, or
well, no, it
was
was one of those things that I talked about before, where the book is eating the book as you're writing. It's a cannibal process, and so I started out with this very strict idea. I sat down with and it was triggered by for good or bad, or probably not for the reasons most people would do this, but there was all this kind of information in the news at the time. It was during the sort of really bad period in the suburbs of Baghdad. And all these reports of different people taking over different parts of streets, not even entire neighborhoods, parts of streets, and that the goal was to move laterally and kill everybody over there or kill everybody there. In the meantime, in this checkered way, normal life was going on. So you would have scenes like, somebody's packing their school bag and getting a thing ready, and the next thing you know, pellets rip the entire family to shreds. And this is not noticed by anyone because everyone is involved in what's happening next, whatever. Yeah. And so I took that idea in a very kind of strict way, got a map of Collingwood, went out into Collingwood and sort of took a note of street addresses and names and stuff like that and wrote them all down. And then I give everyone would get maybe a page and a half or two, and it would begin as if this was not going to happen. So the narrator wouldn't be able to prepare, wouldn't be able to make it meaningful, would have missed that opportunity because didn't see this happening. And so it would have to be, it was a failure because everybody died. But we'll start again. We'll move down to the next house. Start again. Okay. And the morning happened, and so and so came in, but the narrator is working in good faith because it looks like he's setting up themes, and you know what I mean. There is a narrative here that's happening, and he clearly is investing his toolbox in to make this work, and then it will have to start again. And then I was kind of stood back and let this go on for a while. I realized that for this to happen properly, it can't behave like this anymore. Because we know now that we will always wait for that to happen.
So
a page and a half in, we will wait for where's the bullet coming from, where's the death coming from, and so then the slaughter had to happen from somewhere within the story, from a different location in the structure of the story, rather than through the window or in the narrative pieces. It had to sort of happen that the story's ability to proceed is messed with.
Yeah.
Its ability to observe is now, its ability to mean is sort of played with in a way that's violent.
And again,
and other things like that. And so then it becomes, like you said, it becomes a failed short story collection because it tried to succeed. Too much. It got too pure-hearted, and then it becomes a whatever it does, and that changes to a bunch of different things.
Yeah, and in some weird way, it almost seems like it kind of passes again, like this point where now it's a novel by default because you've connected the stories through murder, and it's being like, now we realize, one town has decided to murder the other town, and that is now it is a story about that broader slaughter, like as a generalized kind of concept, and then it starts to move forward, and it's still kind of unstable, but in a very different way, I guess you'd say. And it makes me think of a lot of what you've been talking about. Makes me think a little bit of how I see David Lynch often working. Where the one thing I like to say about Lynch is like Lynch realized that you don't have to actually have a story that makes sense on a surface level, as long as it makes sense, it feels like a story. Like if it has like the structure of a story and it feels like a story, then almost like it almost frees up the surface level to accomplish any task.
To do anything it wants. And this goes right back to, for me, I understand that completely. I think it's a very important thing to get. But when I was sort of thinking in my mind how to create the dynamics of an aggressive punk band through speaking in front of an audience, and you have to. There are certain things you have to satisfy first, and your audience has to feel like they're getting what they think they're getting. and then you can do whatever you want, and then you can upend them and surprise the shit out of them. The bait they think they're taking is not there at all anymore. The thing that they thought they've already invested. They're in a little bit too far to get back out again. But anyway, yeah, and with Lynch, yeah, you can do that with film.
Well, let's maybe talk a bit more about film and how you've kind of moved into film, like maybe as a way of answering that question. Because again, like when I look at Lynch, like I like to kind of look at his screenplays and just kind of how his movies are structured, and you really do see in many respects like it is the absolute, on one level, it is absolutely conventional in its structure. Yes. At least, yeah. But doesn't. And if you look at Eraserhead, for example, Eraserhead is almost to a T, maybe without him. I assume without him even planning this. Right. It's almost to a T, like that classic cliche of like the hero's journey, and there's a monster,
absolutely,
and he kills the monster, and is rewarded through heaven. Like there's all sorts of like really he gets an object in the mail. It's like this, like there's all sorts of ways in which it just literally conforms. And Lost Highway to me, which is another really interesting Lynch film, like it has that.
Yeah. Those are the two best Lynch films.
Yeah, like I feel so. I really like Mulholland Drive a lot too, but like
I won't watch Mulholland Drive.
You what?
I won't watch it.
Some people are really against it. Like my friend.
No, I'm not against it. I'm afraid of it.
Sure.
Like, people have told me about it, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Well,
but anyway,
it has like a really brilliant scene in the middle of it.
But
in any case. But I think like especially Lost Highway, like when with the mystery man, when the mystery man comes to him at the party, like to me that is one of the most brilliant scenes. But it's perfectly conventionally structured as a scene, even though it makes zero sense in another level.
Yeah,
and I feel like even in that movie, there's a great scene later in that film where Lynch is almost making fun of the fact that we want it to make sense. Like there's one point where later in the film, Patricia Arquette's character, one of her characters, says, laughs at him because and asks him, you want to know why? It always seems like Lynch is laughing at us to me, and the need to understand it as a sensible story.
Yes.
But at the same time, he wants it to feel that way in some level. So anyways, I'm just wondering, like, since you've been doing a lot more screenwriting, certainly than used to, and of course you even adapted Pontypool. The most obvious thing about the Pontypool movie is that it has almost no actual narrative connection to the book, and is. I'm just wondering, like, how do you approach screenwriting? And your books, you also seem like an unusual person to write a screenplay because your books really aren't filmic. And in some respects, they're like impossible to adapt to film. Like they almost seem meant to be unfilmable. But yet you've adapted one, and you're working in film. Yeah. I'm just curious to know, like, how you approach film differently, or to what degree.
Well, one of the things for sure is that I don't direct any of the films I'm writing.
Yeah,
that makes a big difference.
Sure.
I want to do that, but at the same time, I just need to get myself geared up to doing something like that. But for the films that I've been writing lately, I mean, I'm really a hired guy that comes in the room, give me a bunch of ideas, I'll go off and write it, because I learned how to write screenplays working with Bruce.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's a real kind of tradesperson thing that I now know how to turn out a screenplay, and I can put some of my stuff on it, but mostly I know how to take your ideas and make you happy with the script that I write, and it'll be the kind of film you can make, and your distributors will buy, and whether it's any good or not, it's not. That's not my concern, really. But anyway, so that's kind of this.
Not your fault whether it's
not
good
well,
or not.
I know. So like, which is kind of good and bad. But anyway, So I mean, and I enjoy these films because I have a big passion for B grade. Ambitious B grade, illogical films, and I think they should be made with confidence, like they used to be. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so that's that part of it, because for a long time, like Bruce kind of I didn't know how to write a screenplay. I mean, he walked in and optioned Pontypool, and he said, in his kind of like his way, you want to write the screenplay, and I'm like, yeah, because I need the work. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like writers don't really have a lot of opportunities to make money, so yeah, I'll do that. I had no idea how to write a screenplay, and so I just like the way he sort of made me feel like I could, which is one of his charms. So I ran off and I wrote a screenplay, just the same way you do anything. You think you can, and he loved it. And I actually had flowers sent to my house, and he did this big show, which I realize now is the director sending the flowers to the actress. You know what I mean? To sort of like make her to try harder or something. It's not really love.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so the script got, and he loved it. And it got sent out because that's what happens. And it got sent out to readers. And blah, blah, blah. Producers are going to have notes and shit like that. And everybody hated it. I'm like, what the fuck? What?
Yeah.
I'm a crazy writer. You're supposed to love everything I do. I can't make mistakes. I don't make mistakes in my world. And they're like, oh, no. And so then other people brought it. So it was about 10 years of me writing and rewriting 25 drafts,
wow.
Completely different drafts for probably at least 10 or 12 different producers over time, good ones, and working with Bruce and different people. And at different times, co-writers that come on and then they go and come and go. But really, for me, that was learning how to actually write a screenplay, which does make a difference, much more so, I think, than maybe I had an intuitive sense of how to write a story or how to write fiction or that kind of thing, because I read. I'm not sure how I, and even then, I probably play more with my incompetence than with my skills. But anyway, so it took a very long time to figure out how to do that. I still haven't written the film that is one that I would direct. You know what I mean? And I've often wondered about that, because some people go, well, you go off tones and you come up with something and come back with this. I'm like, no, you can't do. I can't do that, because I'm going to come back with something and you're going to be on page one and you're going to go, we can't do anything with this. Yeah. This is fucking crazy. So I'm waiting working with some people that, I've been talking to about the possibility of me directing a feature, which I'd love to do, that's one of the things that I need to do and try my hand at that. So, the whole screenwriting thing is still an apprenticeship for me, even 15 years on.
I want to jump back maybe, before I can let you go, I want to jump back to something that you were talking about, not, today, but earlier, where you, in the kind of other part of the interview that I was doing earlier, you were talking at one point about how in some ways what you see yourself doing is phatic fiction. And it has this like phatic interest or goal, I suppose it might say, rather than what we might otherwise think of fiction doing.
Yeah.
And I can see how in some ways that starts to connect to this process that you've developed and some of the concerns or the aesthetic interests you have here. But I wonder if you could maybe just talk a bit more about what you maybe mean by phatic fiction. And the kind of question I specifically have is like, well, what is then we think of phatic speech as something that's expressing rather than really having a meaningful component. And so what I'm wondering is like, well, what are these things expressing? Like, what are these books expressing?
All right. Well, by phatic, I mean by phatic language. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, phatic is emptying the instrument of content so that it becomes apparent to you that I am here, because that's all that this can do, is say I am here. There is no other freight, there is no other direction, there is no other lesson, there is no other content material, and anything that I might put there will interfere with the signal.
Sure.
And you will no longer know if I'm here or not. So I don't believe that I have anything, or that I've ever. This is just going to sound so insane, that I don't believe that I have ever said or thought anything, or heard or read anything that was of any value, unless it was disposable, ephemeral, and losable, when the far more important feature of that instrument is to let you know I am here. Everything else interferes with that. Everything else is a problem.
Sure.
The only thing that can possibly be successful in any what we conventionally call a meaningful way is for you to know that I am here, and me to know that you are here, and there isn't any like this. I'm sounding like a mystic now, but there isn't anything else, and so which is one of the reasons why I'm quite comfortable with my books falling apart and the freight disappearing. Sorry, I mean that sounds ridiculous. I know. But
I don't think it sounds ridiculous. What I think is interesting about it is that you're working with horror, and so to me, I guess I wonder, like, is horror the best material to work with to indicate that I am here, or is I am here producing horror?
Well, that's a very good one. I mean, well, it could be that they are good; they service each other well. And maybe that you could go to the Stephen King's hierarchy of what you want to do, and maybe what I want to do is say hello. That's my A game, right? and then to have all of this other content would be my C game, right? That's going to give other people something else to talk about.
I find that phatic fiction sort of I find it so interesting because it kind of produces this, especially in horror, because it kind of produces this interesting situation where maybe it's horrible that you're here, or maybe it's horrible.
Oh no, exactly.
You might lose that message, and
yes.
like the here-ness is lost, or maybe the form is horrible. Like one thing I find when I teach your books is that some like or I've done this a few other books that I've taught. Like there's Stephen Graham Jones has a great book called Demon Theory. Which, again, when I teach it, it becomes really, like when I teach Pontypool, it becomes very disturbing for the students that it is not a normal book. Like, and they find the formal difference, the way that it is kind of, again, almost a category violation or a transgressive thing, like as a book. Like the form of it is monstrous somehow.
It's perverse and it's embarrassing because it's not. It didn't come that way.
And they find it disturbing that you're talking to them. Like in Pontypool, people are very disturbed by the autobiographical segments, or like the ones that are meant, clearly as a kind of autobiographical intrusion. Like they find that really disturbing, and they're not used to it. And again, like to me, it's really
disruptive.
Fascinating. It's disruptive, And it's on one hand, I think it kind of comes out of that tension that you kind of talk about, and again, the tension I see in Lynch a lot, and where it becomes horrible often in Lynch is where it seems like it's a movie, but it's not operating like a movie,
right?
And you kind of, it just feels wrong. Like it feels like it shouldn't be, and yet here it is insisting on his presence.
Oh no, I love that. I love that. I mean, and that goes to a whole bunch of different things. One of them. That to be here is a disruption. Something phatic is something we quickly get rid of and treat as if it isn't there at all. Hello. It's the most formal kind of. Reminds me of the way. Things that are considered the most spontaneous are often the most codified.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, and the great argument, which I refer to all the time because it's something that keeps my head thinking. Good old Rosalind Krauss did a bunch of papers on the difference between a Magritte and a Dolly, or no, the difference between a surrealist photograph and a Magritte, and that they are both achieving the same thing. And one of them is completely banal, and just a photograph of anything. It's the act of photography, which is automatic, right? And the other is the Magritte, which is the presentation of automatism, as a clinical idea of automatism. They're both referring to the same thing, but as products, as things in front of you. They're both via disruptions, but they're completely different being here.
Makes me think also of Ligotti, and like I just read Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which is his nonfiction book about pessimism. And but Ligotti has this interesting, and it's not original to him. He's kind of talking about the history of it, but that interesting idea that somehow consciousness is a monster, and a monstrous thing, and the presence of you here is potentially horrifying, like in and of itself, at least from a certain point of view. Whereas, like from another position, of course, the monster is, like the monster is there, and you have to get rid of the monster. There's again these kind of interesting. There's just this. The horror perspective of I am here is either I'm here in the nightmare, or my present I am the monster.
Right.
And I think while you've got like more positive ways to insist on one's presence, it's what's interesting to me is how the books seem really radical and sort of taking on the mantle of the monster. And there's an anxiety that is produced by them, but I don't feel they have, and that's where to me they seem really interestingly radical, where they don't seem concerned about their own monstrosity.
No, and nor would they. Mm-hmm. I just don't think they would. I mean, because that would require them to sort of occupy you looking at them, or you understanding them. And it's not like a snapping turtle running around in the muck goes, "Oh my God, my horrible mouth,"
Yeah. But it is the difference between, I think, the metafictional approach that you were talking about not doing, and this kind of maybe approach that you have. And where, say, like In the Mouth of Madness by Carpenter, or some of those other, otherwise interesting horror works sort of fail. Like they fail maybe in the moment of.
You can tell when they fail. The moment, for me anyway, the moment they fail, because they lean against a stable frame of reference that they didn't have before then, and then from then on in, that frame of reference will never be exposed again.
Sure.
It will now be hidden in the thing, and it will no longer matter. Anyway, that you can see that in all kinds of things. Do that. Jacob's Ladder did that to me. I remember, very disappointingly, and I have had to do that with film, and been forced to do that, where I thought, fuck's sakes, man, like in Ejecta. We were having a problem. How do we resolve? What is the ending going to be? And I said, well, just have the ending. Him and the monster are combined in this kind of physical pancake that slid out of the truck into the ditch. And the truck went off into the thing, but nobody ever found them. And so the last half of the movie is them sort of barely alive, like just sort of like bubbling along the floor of the forest, trying to figure out how to keep going. Now the movie is no longer there, and they're like, no, we can't, what I mean? So you've got to put in all of the elements. And same with Pontypool, but the film. But in that case, and Bruce helped me too. I mean, we were very subversive on set around the things that the producers and other people wanted us to do to make it work, and even actors too. Like that last speech that McCaddy had about the wheel and devil, and this is what you do, and it doesn't make a fucking lick of sense. It's absolutely ridiculous. It makes not a lick of sense. It is completely meaningless, and is in the place of, where those kinds of speeches should be. But it absolutely is connected to nothing.
yeah, I've got to let you go, but
Yep.
but I think well, maybe we can talk more about this another time. But like, I think
Sure.
In film you have, I mean, you're automatically in this position where the camera is God and the camera is looking at things from God's perspective, and so the instability starts to bleed away unless you really, really struggle to maintain it, which of course is economically not viable a lot. But But I'm gonna let you go just because I've got to run off now.
Yeah, I got things to do now too.
But thanks so much, and
no problem,
I'll
man.
like pull this into like the interview, and I'll send you something to look at before I send it anywhere else, and you know, maybe make some changes or whatever you want to do. But yeah, thanks. This is great.
Awesome.
So
anytime you want to do anything, follow up. Let me know.
Great.
Random question. I'm always available to you, Mr. J. Ball.
Well, thank you. Nice to talk to you, and yeah, we'll talk again.
Right. For sure, man.
Bye.
Ciao.